So we are all together. People are still arriving, but now it feels like the right time to start. We're just 5 minutes past the hour. And I just want to say welcome. Welcome to Rendezvous. Today, as you are aware, we're focusing on the GSR. And we have a lineup for you of panelists who are going to discuss some of the things they discovered, explored, and so on. So some really exciting and useful conversations. I'm going to invite Rana to do this official kickoff of this rendezvous, where we focus on the rendezvous. Rana, what is it you're hoping for today?
So what is it I'm hoping for today? So hello, Matt, first to start with. Really glad to be here. I guess like the first part is obviously to have our community, our contributors community together very much around the Global States Report. Not only contributors community, but I guess like presenting the report, so the Renewables 2022 Global States Report. But then really also having the opportunity to meet a couple of people behind the scenes, so to say, from the Rent-A-Run Secretariat team, from the authoring team, special advisors, and also many contributors, I think, who are participating today in the Global Rendezvous. We had started doing this last year for the first time when we launched the Renewables in Cities Global States Report, because we basically realized that there were so many people participating in our crowdsourced knowledge activities, I guess, and who do not always know each other. And ultimately, it is also about connecting and building this community. So this is what I hope for from the day to day. Brilliant.
And I'm sure that's completely okay with everybody else if we aim for that. That's awesome. Thanks, Rana. So look, let's get into it. You've got a bit of a talk prepared for us. We call them lightning talks, because this isn't going to be a 3-hour PowerPoint slide. This is the GSR. It's 20 minutes of it's 20 minutes of summary and things like that. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now I'm just looking because my my file is saving. I hope this will. Okay, it has saved. That's good news. So yes, indeed, I will not. I mean, as you know, everybody, we're talking about a report that is something around 300 pages long. Obviously, in 20 minutes, I will not be able to explain you everything which is in this report. I myself have not read those 300 pages, and I'm discovering every time I'm looking at it new things where I feel like, wow, that's noteworthy. We can tell a story. We should pitch it here and there. And I hope this is probably so I'm just going to give you a bit of a teaser, I guess, in the overall story to invite you to then dig deeper, because there is indeed lots of great stories to share. So, just in case there are some people who don't know us yet, I'm just going to explain very quickly who we are, but also because I really feel that the Renewables Global States Report is very much reflecting of what we are doing and how we're doing things. So Rent-A-Run is the global community, and the only global community actually, of players from science and academia, NGOs, governments, and industry, all working together to really accelerate the transition towards renewable energy. This does not mean that they only come from the renewable energy supply side, but obviously we're speaking about deep structural changes and different players working together. Now, we have our members, but we have basically this fabulous community of plus 3,000 community members and change makers. And what is very powerful, I think, is we always describe Rent-A-Run as a network of network, as an octopus, because you all around the table have insights which are extremely meaningful and important for the renewable energy transition. And they are different. So the idea is really here to bring all this together and build a decentralized crowdsourced intelligence with the objective that we can inform and influence. Let's be honest, we try to influence decision makers to really make the shift to renewable energy happen, but also shape the way we are thinking about renewable energy. So the Renewables Global States Report 2022 is basically a massive crowdsourced annual report. This year we had more than 600 people participating in different roles. And I would really like to congratulate all of you who have participated in this, but also really deeply thank you for that, because there is so many information which is not consolidated yet and which can only be consolidated here on this platform, which we can offer from Renters On Site with the Global States Report, because you are playing the game and engaging here. Now, I will not go into detail basically on what we're looking at. Globally, we're looking at the global trends, policies, market, industry, investments. So this is, as I said, it's not only about the renewable supply side, but also the systems. We have a focus on subnational governments, so renewables in cities, and also the role of renewables for energy access. So you will find, again, a report which looks similar than past reports, but already introduces some future changes, changes we have been integrating over the last couple of years, slowly, step by step, but which will become more radical, I guess, in the future. Since I won't have time to basically speak about all those changes, I really invite you to dig into the report, and you will find some infographics. Here are some examples, only snippets of those, on renewable energy and transport, where very clearly we have the fossil fuel dependence and its largest growth in energy demand. I'll come back to this later. Renewable energy in the building sector, so 50% of the big elephant in the room, and the other 50% renewable energy in industry and agriculture. What is the message here? The message is very clearly that we are today in a space where it is not only about showing how great renewable is doing on the supply side, but really, and this is clearly Renters On's focus, is looking at the overall systemic transformation of the energy system, but not only the energy system, also the economy and the society that builds around an efficient and renewable-based system. And this clearly means that we need to look into supply, yes, but also demand and cross-cutting sectors like the finance sector, energy access, so because there is a development component, the cities part, etc. So in the future, you will have a much stronger focus also on those, and we'll move to kind of a modular building up of the global story. But you'll hear more about this. So let's come back to 2021. As you know, the Global States Report is always looking back at the last year. The reality of this year, we really also, given the energy costs, the energy price situation, and also obviously the current geopolitical situation with Russia's invasion into Ukraine, we have clearly in the trends also included more of the beginning of 2022. Now, when we think about 2021, after COVID, there was very clearly the promise of a green recovery. And I think to some extent, this promise did take place because we clearly saw an increase in net zero commitments in 2021 with a clear change in ambition and 135 countries having committed to net zero by 2050, partly 2060. So that is something which is clear. We also saw from the IEA net zero scenario, many other types of players, subnational players, corporations, etc., committing basically here. And another great story is obviously another record edition in the renewable energy power sector. Again, record editions with a 17% growth over 2020. 350 gigawatt of installed capacities. And this is fabulous, especially if we think about the impact, the economic impact we have observed in COVID. So there's clearly also resilience of the renewable energy sector that existed. Now we're coming to the sad part of the story. It's not enough. It's just not enough, because when you're looking to for the 2030 IEA net zero scenario, or also 2050, we actually need to triple, for instance, the power additions. We had an electricity demand growth of 6%, and so the record additions don't allow to catch up for the increase, but also not accelerate basically and exponentially accelerate the development. So as you know, and we feel like a broken record with regard to this, electricity is not energy. So it's really important that we have a look at the energy system and make a reality check. So here you'll see like the development of energy demand over the last decade. And again, the message which we already had last year, the share of renewable energy has moved from 8.7% to 11.7% between 2009 and 2019, which is great, which is really the result of those record additions. At the same time, the share of fossil fuel in the total final energy demand is basically stable. What does this mean? It actually means that it's not enough to support renewable energy. We clearly need to invest into energy saving, energy efficiency, and renewables. But also this is not enough, given the structural dependence and concentration around fossil fuel. It is time to really phase out fossil fuel. Especially in the current situation, we see that this task seems to become more difficult day by day, but we'll come to that later. I think what is interesting, so why did we not use 2020 as a reference point? Because you could say like, oh, the share here is much better. The reality is in 2020, we had COVID-19 lockdown, so it's not representative for the overall trend. However, this is a really interesting year because the energy demand, because of the COVID lockdowns, went down. And the share of renewables went up to 12.6%. So we clearly see that the interplay of energy saving, efficiency, and renewable energy do really work and are effective. But are not enough because the energy demand has also grown in 2020 by 4%. So even though we're in record developments, we're not catching up with the demand, and we're actually not catching up with the structural inertia which is existing in our energy systems and in our economies. The other aspect, again, is fabulous developments, again, in the power sector, where we have an increased share of 28% in the power sector of the total final energy consumption. When we're looking again into the overall energy demand, over 80% is used for heating and cooling. So the elephant in the room, which is the building sector and industry. Here we have a share of 11.2% of renewable energy. And in transportation, we only have a share of 3.7%. Slightly increased, as you can see, basically, especially the transport sector, we see a slight increase of the attention also, I'd say. The challenging part, however, is this is the sector with the highest demand growth, especially driven very much by the demand in Latin America and Asia. So we're very, very far away. When you look into the shares here, we're very far away from the exponential growth of renewable energy. When we're looking into the different energy sectors, there are some spikes of hope, I'd say, with one, the electrification of the heating and cooling sector and the transport sector, which allows to really build on the real advantages in the power sector, where renewable energy today is the least cost option to produce electricity. So this is something which is basically working hand in hand with, for instance, thermal renewable energy. But also when we're looking into the hard-to-abate sectors, so in the industry sector, the development and the attention to renewables-based hydrogen. We look at things globally. This time, for the first time, we also did an assessment about where we stand in the economy-wide situation. So it is very clear that we need a higher share of renewable energy in all our economic activities. And this means that it is interesting to really use this parameter or this key indicator as an indicator of advancement. When you look at the selected countries, so we don't have the numbers for all countries, we see that actually only 3 countries have a renewable energy share in the total final energy consumption of over 50%, only 3 countries, Iceland, Sweden, and Finland. That's actually quite varying, especially when you see that 60 countries have like a share of 10 to 20%, you see, 50% of those less than 10 and the other one between 10 and 20. So it shows again that we are just really not on track, and we need to be outspoken about this, I think, because there is much at stake. What is interesting about those countries, I think, is to see that they have actually tackled the energy transition in quite a holistic way. So obviously, because they had good resources in Iceland, for instance, geothermal, Sweden, Finland, biomass, and they were addressing directly not only the electricity sector, also because of those resources, but also the heating and cooling sector, also in industry, and also transportation. So we clearly see that this shift to looking into the energy sectors, where we will clearly also need to bring our attention to, is important. Now, you heard that the net zero ambition had increased in 2021. So this is great. 135 countries with a net zero policy. How does this come that when we look at the energy transition, we are actually not on track? And here, I think we clearly see that there is a certain shyness or a disconnect between the fact that the climate ambitions need to directly be translated in very concrete strategies and planning on moving away from a fossil fuel-based energy system that is responsible for 75% of our CO2 emissions to an efficient and renewable-based energy system. From those 135 countries, only 84 countries have an economy-wide renewable energy target, and these are actually not always super ambitious, let's be honest. And from those, only 36 have 100% renewable energy target. Now, this basically means if we really take it like in a binary way, only 18% of all countries worldwide have 100% renewable energy target. So what is the message? There is a disconnect between the climate discussion and the energy transition discussion. That's really a reality. And let's be honest, you also see it that, at COP, we still lack many of the energy ministers. So I think this is maybe something to work towards in view of the next COP. At the same time, in 2021, and I think this is something which is really important, we're observing a real pressure on the fossil fuel system. So a collapse of the fossil fuel system, that's a question mark. Very clearly, and that's something which not only was happening in 2021, but for climate and environmental reasons, the fossil fuel system should be collapsing. That's probably the first one. For health impact too, 12 million people die due to outdoor and indoor air pollution every year. Now, what we have observed starting in September was clearly challenges on the supply chain because of COVID, because of some responses of fossil fuel exporting countries, a clear economic impact with massive increases in gas prices and coal prices and oil prices, a high volatility that is actually a massive burden for the global economy and society, not only because of the price spikes, but also because of the volatility. At the same time, because of those increased prices, we have basically two effects which we observe. Windfall profits for fossil fuel players, whether it is companies or fossil fuel exporting countries. And on the other hand, billions of people facing energy poverty. So in Spain, for instance, we have launched that these are there. 17% of the households are facing energy poverty, just to give an example. This is actually a massive pressure on the global economy. So a burden to the global economy. And at the same time, we see that the response is very often from the governments to come back to traditional responses of reducing our energy bill to basically address the threat of energy poverty. But this basically means that we are providing even more profits to the fossil fuel players and subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. With the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, clearly renewable energy has also, or we're facing energy security question, and there is a lot of focus today on the economics and energy security of our energy system. So renewables could be an answer here, but we see that at the same time, fossil fuel continues to be subsidized, $11 million per minute. And we also see that this current situation really leads to a massive investment in new drilling projects, fossil fuel, shale gas, coal. China has gone up in 2021, the coal consumption by 9%. A diversification in terms of fossil fuel sources, instead of looking for really seeing this as or taking this as an opportunity to deeply change, to drive the structural transition and transformations we need. Now, the question is, the fossil fuel era is ending. Is it really ending? But the renewable energy era needs to start. Is it really starting? I think what is really interesting, and in the positive days, in the optimistic days, I really would like to focus more on this part of, yes, there is an opportunity. There is clearly a big stress. And we see that currently, and especially those last days, there is a lot of, Europe is starting to open up coal again. We see that we are investing in massive fossil fuel infrastructure, which might become and should probably become stranded assets for climate reasons. So there is a lot of tension. However, what we also see is that governments turn basically to renewable energy because they do offer real advantages when we're looking into other aspects, not only the climate and development aspects, but also the cost aspects. For instance, reducing expenses, managing costs, economic development, an opportunity for countries to really develop local economic, so energy supply chains, energy value chains, but also economic value chains that are basically hosted in the countries and depend on renewable energy as a sovereign energy. Obviously, provided that you have the access to technology and the right policy and regulatory frameworks, industrialization, innovation, and also energy security. So there is really, I guess, like moving from a niche attention still into the heart of economics and geopolitical decision is also an opportunity, because renewable energy has a real value proposition here. One value proposition, renewable energy cost, the least cost option to produce renewable electricity. That's one part. But also, let's be really honest, an energy system that is actually resilient to the volatility of the prices. So we're going away from a commodity thinking here into an infrastructure and energy service and a real economic value chain. So that is something which is really interesting and is also being recognized as an opportunity. There's basically no or low operational cost, and there is no fuel cost when we're thinking about renewable energy. So that's a real advantage. There is another advantage. The reality is renewables is decentralized, can be produced decentralized. Wind, sun, biomass, etc., are available almost everywhere in the world. So wind and sun everywhere in the world, but to different extents. So it is possible for countries to develop local energy. Again, provided there is access to technology, provided there is the right policy and market regulations, and obviously also differentiating depending on the resources in a country, in the city, etc. Another aspect of this decentralized part is, however, that many players can actually participate in this energy transition, not only as consumer, but also as producers, as active economic player. And we clearly see that, for instance, corporations have identified this as a massive opportunity since several years. We always hear RE100, the players saying like, here for corporations, renewables does not only make climate sense, but also economic sense. If you look at the development, for instance, of corporate power purchase agreements, They have grown by 24% in 2021 over 2020, compared to 18% in the year before. So here we clearly see a steep uptake and corporations coming in, also because they need to ensure actually that their energy supply. So it's also a security question today. Another type of player who's engaging, and I think who's players who are very important, especially when we see the threat the fossil fuel situation represents for citizens today, is the role of city governments. In 2021, more than 1,500 cities had either a renewable target or renewable energy policy. This has gone up from 1,300 cities in 2020 and means actually that today 30% of the urban population is living in a city with a renewable energy engagement. So here again, the possibility not only to address the climate, health and economic issue, but also building a governance that is a much more inclusive governance and where we're not in the situation where few players are taking advantage only of, for instance, the energy price situation, but many can participate in the economic value chains which are building on renewable energy. So I'm going to end on this word. The reality is we do have a choice, and we are faced with a choice, and this choice comes down to the question, where do we put our money? And it's actually a quite easy calculation. 2021 was a year with record additions, record investment. 366 billion US dollars went into renewable power and fuel investment. When we are looking on the right side of the slide, you have basically the different net zero scenarios with different ambitions. Let's take the most ambitious one, which is the BNEF green scenario. An annual investment during the next 8 years, so it's limited times, we would need to have an annual investment of approximately 1.9 trillion US dollars per year. This is obviously a massive amount of money, but it is an investment into future, resilient, and affordable energy infrastructure. And let me just compare it, maybe in a polarized way, but I think when we're looking into what choices societies need to face today, in 2020, we have a cost of 5.9 trillion US dollar because of the fossil fuel subsidies. This is 7% of the global GDP. And I just think it's very clear that this does not only come down to a political choice, but it's very clearly a societal choice about what energy system and what economy we want to, or what energy system we want to be the cornerstone, the backbone of our economies and societies. That's basically the Renewables 2022, Global States Report 2022 story. And I thank you for the attention. I think I was longer than what you had hoped for, Matt, but
honestly, yeah. Well, my first reaction to that is a selfish response of kind of just really appreciated seeing those slides and hearing your explanation of it. And I know that Yogesh has commented in the chat as well about it being a great presentation, because it felt like a call to action to me. It was really, it felt really insightful, but also at a level that somebody like me who is outside of the world of renewables can understand and feel a sense of urgency. So thank you. And I'm sure that everybody in attendance today has some reflections, also some questions, maybe even some challenges to what they've heard so far. I'm going to ask you all to kind of just keep those in mind for a little while, because we're going to move into a panel discussion shortly that will offer some more context and some more insight to what Rana has already shared with us. However, before we get to that point, the people that organize these rendezvous sessions, we've got a little back channel chat to make sure that things flow quite well. You're not meant to know that, so I'm telling you this for the first time. So we conspire to make sure it flows as well as possible. And Jessica has put in a request that I need to respond to, and I'm basically just going to invite Jessica to talk. Jessica, what is it you want from us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. Well, what I would like is to quickly introduce myself to everyone. So if you haven't seen me yet, I am the person behind Ren21's Twitter and also the LinkedIn. And that means I love taking photos. And I see we've got an amazing group of people here. So I would really like to take a digital selfie or a digital screenshot of everyone with their biggest smile. So I invite everyone to turn on their cameras if they would like to be part of this amazing crowdsourced selfie. So I'm going to count down in 3, 2, 1, and then if everyone could please look at your camera. So everyone, nice big smiles. 3, 2, 1. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. You look absolutely lovely, and I'll hand back the floor to Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Jessica. And
maybe this was me, Matt. Actually, I would just like to maybe because I forgot to mention this. I would since Jessica appeared, I would really like to I thank the contributors community. I would really like to thank the Ren21 Secretariat team, and in particular the knowledge and data team and the GSR team here. About their work and pulling basically all this work together. And then also, since Jessica came up, obviously having such a report sitting on the desk is not enough. You need to pull it out and push it out. So thanks also to the comms team for doing this. So Jessica, Yasmin, and Janice.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was just a good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and moving and sort of building on that a little bit, Rana, when we talk about the people that contributed and the external contributors from within Ren21 and also external to Ren21, this is where we're moving to next, is the panel discussion. So, Catherine, my sidekick, is going to spotlight Adam, Hagar, Charlotte, Natalie, and Hend. And so it's kind of, we're inviting you to the stage now. To engage in a bit of a panel discussion. And so that panel discussion is going to be, this panel discussion is 15 minutes, just to sort of, so people can listen and hear some of your insights, some of your discoveries, and so on when it comes to the creation of the Global Status Report. And so all good panel conversations start with a question, and then hopefully I don't need to keep adding questions in because people want to hear from you, not from me. So I'm going to kick us off with a conversation and then leave you to it. So I think the question that I would like to invite to start us off with, Rana on her slides, I didn't know this, talked about the GSR sort of from 2005. And now we're sort of where we are in 2022. That's a significant amount of time. So the question I'd like to sort of throw in just to get the conversation going is kind of, how is this report different from previous years, and how do you feel it's evolved? Over to you, folks.
Can I start then, Matt? I've been involved with, I haven't been involved since 2005, but I've been involved in the GSR for actually 7 years now. I've been involved as a sort of special advisor to the whole thing, but particularly in the bioenergy chapter. And I think the report has very significantly evolved over that period from being a rather factual document, which had a sort of pretense, I think, to be a bit neutral about renewables, although it was clearly a pro-renewables document. It's gone to being a much more strategic document, a lot more key messages and so on and so forth. So I think it's progressed enormously in that time to really contribute to the debate. And you just heard some of the messages from Rana, which I think exemplify that. So I think it's evolved a lot, and I think this year was another big step in that direction, and particularly the move to the sectoral chapters and so on and so forth, I think is which has been progressing for a while, but I think that's a big step in the right direction. I mean, it's still one of the only places where you can really follow the development of renewables in the different sectors. It still has the excellent graphics and things that it's always had, but I think it's becoming a much more strategic and relevant document than just documenting what was happening in a rather neutral way.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Adam. It's really insightful. Natalie, you look like you want to. You've got the microphone. You've got the microphone poised. So I'm going to invite you to talk next.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Well, hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to do a little round of presentation first, so you identify who is here around the table today. I'm going to start with Charlotte. I see here. Charlotte has been working with us. This year, she was a reviewer, a close reviewer of the investment chapter in particular. So she brings today her IMF hat, I would say, but she has extensive experience in investment and finance topics related to renewables. So this is Charlotte that is here with us today.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Thanks. Then Adam already spoke, and Adam, as he presented himself, he worked.
I jumped the queue there.
It's okay, don't worry. That's fine. And he worked as a special advisor this year, and as well as bioenergy author. So this is something where he has been working with us for a few years already. And then we have also Hagar that is here sitting with us, and Hagar has worked as a author for the PV chapter section of the market and industry chapter. So Hagar is the first time working with us. She was working, has extensive experience also working in energy topics related to renewables topics. And well, she has written for the first time this year the solar PV section.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. Hi, everyone.
You're welcome. And within the secretariat, well, there is me, of course, as you can see, but there's also Hen that it's sitting next to me. Hen has supported us and has followed the DREA chapter, mainly. The DREA, I'm sorry, this is an acronym that we use internally, but means Energy Access, Distributed Renewables for Energy Access. And I see that within the crowd, I would say, the people around the table, there's also one author that I have, it's Nicolas Fichot, that it's written the chapter for renewable energy access as well. Not in the spotlight, but it's still here with us. So that's it, Matt. Back to you.
No, brilliant. Thank you. And so thank you for that. And it is lovely to meet you. So I'm going to just throw another question in, just to sort of keep this flow going. With the work that you've done together on this report, what surprised you the most?
For me, it's the amount of data that we're treating. There is a massive amount of information, and to sort it out and put it together so it tells a story. This is, I think, the most challenging part we have. And I will also add, there's a lot of data for some topics, but some others we lack of data. So it's a balance between what we find out there and what we need, and we have to do some extensive research to identify a trend or what is happening. So this is like my view from the secretariat. I think that perhaps some authors can respond, or Charlotte as well.
Yeah, Charlotte, Hagar, what would your addition be?
Yeah, I would agree that it's a large amount of data, and it's also on the global scale. So it's one thing to maybe be looking into a specific country or maybe even a specific region, but then looking on the global scale, there's a lot to take into consideration with quantitative data and qualitative data. But at the end, when you have the full picture, it's always rewarding to see after collecting so much data and looking into it, that you can actually see some insights and useful information that you can pass on to other people.
Thank you.
I'm a bit biased myself because it was only my first year, but I had taken a look before I had read the previous version. So, and I'm only a peer reviewer, but what I can say, especially in the investment part, is that indeed there's quite a lot of data worldwide, and I like the fact that with this report we don't only focus on Europe or the US, for instance, but like all across the world. Which is obviously very important. And also I would say the role of the financial sector, and not just like public investment, has been probably emerging in the latest versions, and is very important in this one, which entails, you know, quite a lot of issues, obviously, and challenges. But I guess we'll you know, touch upon that later today. But yeah, I'd say that the very like global nature of the chapter, at least as far as the investment chapter is concerned, and the fact that you do make the relation, I mean, the link between the public investment side and the private investment side, which is often quite overlooked, in my view, in most reports in that area, especially when it comes to renewables, where we have probably sort of a bias towards public investment only, when the private sector has actually to play a big role as well, especially to go from fossil to renewables. So, yeah.
Key. Hen, do you like anything to add into the mix?
Yeah, so I agree with sorry, everything that has been said. And I would add that as much as the data part, having large amounts of data is rewarding, it was also very challenging, because we had to wade through everything and decide what to show and how to show it to tell the story that was going on. But also that we were lacking data from some regions. So it was also very difficult to find that balance to be able to tell a complete story, since we're looking at global status. And I think it was also like, having worked on the cities report before, I think one of the things that were really developed, like seeing the development of renewable energy targets and policies in cities was really great, especially that half of the world population lives in cities, and that's where like 3/4 of our energy demand is.
Thank you, everyone. So we've talked about kind of the data, the amount and the quality of data that helped to bring this report together. With regards to the report itself, were there any specific findings that kind of surprised you, or that you weren't expecting, or that you discovered? So within the report itself, when you were going through and making sense of that data, were there any findings specifically that you would like to kind of mention?
I would say that, well, Rana said part of the story already in the presentation, but the fact that renewables are not moving fast enough, and with all this energy crisis that we started in 2021, fossil fuels are coming back somehow. So this is, for me, that was the big picture and the bad news that we take out from the report. And especially when we go down into the sectors, we see that this is not happening, and like the picture became clearer and clearer once we finalized and we gathered all the data. So this, for me, was main finding. It's not a find, I wouldn't say it's a finding, because it has been repeating, but it's still the case this year, even if we have put there's ambition and there's people, governments are pushing it, but there's no results on the ground. And this is, for me, like the sad picture that we continue to see.
Maybe I wanted to go on the same line, and I'm sorry for the negative comment here, but it's true that, I mean, I remember that in the investment part, there is like a box where it says that there's been as much investment into coal in 2021 and 2020, if I'm not mistaken, than in renewable power and fuels, sorry. So that's indeed not that, I mean, it could be surprising. It's unfortunately not, but I think it is to the broader public, especially because we don't see the energy system as being like a, you know, piling energy sources. We sort of have that dream that we're actually substituting in one energy source with the other, when it's not really happened. And actually, I want to cite another report that was published at the end of 2021 by the IEA, the coal report, that has shown that even before the Ukraine war, the world had never used as much coal as ever. So it's interesting to see that though there's been like a very continuous cost reduction of low carbon energy versus, you know, carbon intensive energy, we see that this is decreasing, probably because it's, you know, reached that stage of like relative maturity compared to what was happening before. And I think the IPCC report shows that as well. But I'd say that, yeah, I mean, the battle is not over, obviously. And I'm sure we can discuss that later, but there are several obstacles and obviously regulations also going this way, but it's not, it shouldn't be given as a taken. And I think that the bottlenecks and the insufficient supply, I would say, of commodities that had been observed before the start of the Ukraine war could worsen. And so there's something to be looked at as regards the renewable sector. But I'd say that finding, I think, to the broader public, not to the energy community that is well aware of all that, is probably a very surprising one, because people would expect that we're not investing into new coal rather than actually closing down coal-fired power plants in order to open renewable power plants. So I insist on this one, but sorry for the negative thing, unfortunately.
No, it's all insightful and useful to hear. Thank you. Hagar, just to invite you in, is there anything that you wanted to contribute in?
Yeah, speaking of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I feel like increasingly this has brought up the topic of energy security. And speaking of renewables in this context specifically, I think is, of course, very important. But I think another point that is worth shedding some light on and that is highlighted in the GSR is that if the share of specifically, let's say, solar PV were to increase, I think it's the same thing for wind, but I'm not sure, but specifically for solar PV, if its share would increase in total final energy consumption for specific countries, there would still be some sort of energy insecurity because most of these module components, they are manufactured in specific countries. So there's a concentration of where these modules are manufactured. And I think that some countries are already starting to see this, that this, like prospectively, this could happen. And hence they are starting to also develop domestic production or even regional production. And this is not only useful for the countries that are doing this, but also the countries that don't have the capabilities of having domestic production, because at least they would get to benefit from a diversified supply base. So I think, yeah, this point is not only worth mentioning, but also worth pushing for.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've got one last question before we kind of move into some breakout conversations. And it's intentionally a bit of I guess, a naughty question. So obviously there's a lot of data, obviously there's lots of conversation and so on. In the review process, was there anything that you discovered? Is there anything that you read that you disagreed with, or your first response was, that can't possibly be true? Anything that sort of came out for you like that? Adam, would you like anything for you? Oh, just on mute.
I don't think so. I think some of the stuff about the rebound in fossil fuel use after the crisis was a bit of a shock. But apart from that, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's quite clear there are quite a lot of challenges which are highlighted in the report. I don't think we should get too depressed about it, though, on the other hand, because I think there are some good news, good pieces of news. For example, as Rana said, the new capacity in renewables electricity has grown, and even in the sectors where we think things are trailing, like heat and so on, there too, things are really starting to move in quite a number of ways. If you think about the heat pump market's growing, hydrogen in industry is becoming more popular. People are much more interested in green steel and stuff like that. And in the biofuel sector, where which I particularly look at, then in the report we highlighted the big growth in renewable diesel production. And I saw a report yesterday that said there are something like over 50 big new projects under development for renewable diesel and for aviation fuels. And if they come through, that will increase the total biofuels production by about 60%. So I think in a number of areas there are signs that we're going to start getting some much bigger penetration in some of these harder to penetrate sectors. So I think let's not get too depressed. I think we should celebrate the successes that the report highlights, as well as obviously saying we've done very well, but we must try harder, like my school reports used to say. Not bad, but must try harder.
Yeah,
that's the overall message from the GSR as I see it.
That sounds familiar. Thank you for that, Adam. Anyone else? So building on what Adam shared, was there anything sort of during that review process that you thought this can't be true, or is there something that you start quite surprised? Actually, this is a real positive thing that we've discovered and we want to share. Anything from anyone else before we kind of move into the conversations?
This might be a little specific, but we've been going through our heating cooling policy data, and we've been trying to differentiate between heating cooling policies in sectors and in buildings, for example. And it was an interesting discovery that a lot of solar PV mandates were like binding and in 2021 announced in subnational jurisdictions. But that was also interesting in a way that really highlights how important subnational jurisdictions are in the like the spread of these policies, and then maybe taking them to the national level at some point. But that was an interesting discovery, especially that we were expecting to find more policies at the national level.
Thank you. So as we move into breakout conversations, this is what's going to happen next. We're going to invite some people to go away and have some conversations, some small conversations in pairs or threes, to share some of their reflections. And afterwards, I'm going to invite you all back to the stage, if you like. Adam, I know that you won't be able to join us.
No, unfortunately, I have to leave.
No, but thank you for being here. And when people come back, what we're going to do is have a bit of an empty seat where Adam was, and invite people to kind of join in on the conversation and so on. But just to sort of wrap up this part of the conversation, is there any final reflection that you would like to share before we move off into breakout rooms?
Maybe I can stress just a final point, but again, it's not to be depressive at all. It's for people to sort of understand that the financial sector has a bigger role to play there, because there's sort of like a myth that we would transfer from fossil to renewable investment. When the company profiles, the industry, the market capitalization, everything an investor would care about, frankly, is actually really different. And the thing is that current regulations in the financial sector have, concentrated on having better disclosures, in sort of having in mind that, better transparency, like magically, it would be the magic wand for, holding assets, for the holding of risky assets to actually reduce the attractiveness of fossil fuel investment, and so going to renewable. It doesn't happen this way, especially divestment as well. And I think it's actually, we've seen a very complicated season of general assemblies across the world for fossil fuel companies. And we see that pure divestment is actually just selling your asset and transferring it to someone else is not the solution, because the planet is not better off this way. And so that having strong policies to actually not only incentivize, but also, not only incentivize renewable investment, but disincentivize fossil fuel investment is actually one of the keys. And I think, again, just to the broader public, it's probably something to stress as well, because we see that this issue has been more and more mainstreamed, especially in Europe and the US. So that's something I would just point out about. And on the value of renewable investment in the long term, despite the issues of energy security, there's still better value to it. So I would just emphasize that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much. So we're going to move into some breakout rooms now. They're going to be small breakout rooms. You'll be in 2s or 3s, and you have about sort of 5 or 6 minutes just to share some of your reflections. The groups should be small enough that it doesn't feel like it's too fast. But we're going to invite you in to have those conversations now. So is there something that you've heard that's made you reflect? Is there something you would like some more clarity on? Is there something you would like to challenge, or just something that you would add into the conversation? So obviously that was only a short period of time to sort of share some of the reflections on what you've heard from the conversation on the panel and the presentation that Rana gave. What I would say is after the kind of official closing time of this event at hour, you can stay on and talk to people, and we encourage you to do so. If you have time, Catherine and I can create some breakout rooms, and you can go away and carry on having conversations. So if there's something that if you were abruptly cut off in your conversation just then, that's my fault, apologies, but you can carry it on afterwards. But what we're going to do though now is just to take the next sort of 15 minutes or so, just to open the floor up a little bit. So I'm going to ask Catherine to spotlight our panel members and Rana, who presented at the beginning at this point, to sort of, if you like, join me on the stage. And also as well, invite everybody else. If there is a key reflection or something that you want to ask the panel, you can do it a number of ways. You can add it into the chat and they will see it pop up, or you can use the reaction button that's on the bottom of the screen to raise a hand, and it will look like this, as you can see up here on my screen now. And if you do that, then Catherine and Yasmin will see you raise your hand and spotlight you so that you can be seen and asked. But I'm aware that these things take time. People might be typing or thinking, I don't want to be the first one, and that's okay. Instead, I'm going to pick on Hagar, Charlotte, and Rana and say, is there anything from the conversations you had in the room that you would like to kick us off with that sort of resonated for you? Charlotte.
Thank you, Matt. And I'm sorry to speak first, is because unfortunately I have to go in 3 minutes, but it was a really insightful discussion with Ranjan, who is based in Nepal. And what I can take out from that maybe is twofold, more like on a practical level. Ranjan was thinking, and I would tend to agree with him, that having maybe a more robust executive summary and also recommendations, including on the investment part, would be something very valuable for the next version of the report. And that's something that we could have, on which, we could have a discussion like all year long among the REN21 community. I know best about the investment section, but I'm guessing that's kind of the same situation for all sections. That would be very interesting. So to have more like follow-up discussions and reinforcing the community. And the second aspect, more like on the substance, was that the situation of Southeast Asia countries, or I'm guessing also Central Asia. Ranjan was talking about Nepal, about Bangladesh, about Afghanistan. These countries in that area is often overlooked, when actually there is a big place for renewable as well, especially as the oil sector might be struggling in that region. So that's something that more case studies and all that would be very valuable. So we mainly touched upon these topics in the 4 minutes and so that we had.
Thank you.
And thank you. I'm so sorry I have to leave you soon, but it was a very insightful discussion. I'm really looking forward to collaborating more. So thank you, Matt, and everyone, Natalie and Rana.
No, thank you for being here and for everything. Thank you. Hagar, was there anything from the conversations that you had in that brief time that kind of resonated, or do you wanted to kind of elaborate on slightly in this format?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually speaking with Hind, so we were more of discussing the process of putting together the work, and I think I can add on to that. Our discussion is that, again, how the process of putting together a report is very community driven. I think this is very important. I myself, throughout the process when the report was under peer review, received many insightful comments. So I think this was a very interesting part of the report making. In terms of content, I think maybe I'd like to also highlight one of the main findings of the solar PV section specifically, since this is the main section I've contributed to. And it's that similar to past years, there were groundbreaking new installations or new capacity, but increasingly it's becoming more also important that we don't just look at the absolute number of capacities installed, but rather the share of generation from solar PV or any other renewable source in the total final energy consumption. Also, one of the main findings of the solar PV section was that there was, for the first year in 2021, 57% increase in price modules. So at first, this sounds like it might be something negative, but thankfully it didn't affect the levelized cost of power production from solar PV. So this was like something that was negative, probably had some effects on the value chain, but thankfully did not have effects on the levelized cost. And nonetheless, production of electricity from solar PV is still cheaper than fossil fuels.
Thank you. Thanks. It's always a shame. I always want to be in these conversations because I feel like it's an opportunity to learn. And so it's lovely hearing some of these reflections back. Rana, you've got your hand raised. What would you like to contribute?
Yeah, something to contribute. I was in the room with Carmen from ICLEI, ICLEI South Africa, and they're hosting the Sub-Saharan Covenant of Mayors, which is basically also then the network of city governments. And I think 2 points to highlight here. I think really this part of renewable energy is relevant at the city level too. And there is challenging data situations, but in the discussion was also clear that there's opportunities for collaboration. So with the Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa, they are going to work on data, on improving data, not only on the climate side, but also on the energy side. And what I thought, the reason why I think it's interesting to bring this up, we see that there are more and more sectors where renewable energy is relevant, but there is not yet consolidated data, and it's also up to us to work together to build up consolidated and strong data that can be shared, because it's a massive opportunity to actually carry messages. I think this is always so the learning. We can tell great stories, we have great data, but if you don't connect it, it doesn't, you see like there's one leg or 1 feet missing basically. So probably to just bring this back to the community and saying like, if you see opportunities where you feel that we can work together, where you can also help to integrate renewable energy as key performance indicator for advancements in the transition, don't hesitate to bring this to our attention.
Thank you. Thanks. So the invitation was for people to raise a hand if you'd like to join in the conversation, or if you have a question you would like to ask, but have it asked for you, you can in the chat. And I can see that there is actually one in there, and I'm fascinated to ask it. And it is for you, Rana, in terms of, you've been talking to the press recently about the GSR launch and things like that. When you're talking to journalists, what did they pick up on, or what didn't they pick up on? What are the things that sort of resonated?
So what do they pick up on? I'd say one part is really press is local press often. I feel like so there's a global press, yes, but when we speak and we see it, it even comes down to can they speak? So Natalie, for instance, jumped onto press interviews because they really wanted to speak to somebody from Latin America, Caribbean, but also from Spain, who's Spanish speaking. So what is interesting is they are very interested in the global developments, but it makes it much more relevant to them if you can tell a local story, a regional story, a country story compared to another one, because that's actually something they're also looking at. So, and we're seeing similar things when we have, like, as soon as we have a map in the Global States Report and we pull it out, and you come to an event with, I don't know, different regional players, they will actually look their country up. And that is something which is quite powerful. So I think this is one part. The other one is, I think indeed, clearly this part between the tension between, record high on electricity, but this is not energy. The tension on, we are, okay, I wrote it, okay, I don't know. I was going to say like, we are fucked. Okay, I should actually not say it like this. So we are F. I'm so sorry, I don't find another word. But I think this is something when you have like the discussions with some of the players who know that they're actually in a very similar way as we are from the data side. They are in the space from the story side. And then the other part, very clearly, and I think this for me something which is interesting and where there is an opportunity to this part that we have choices, but also so we had some interviews where it was very clear that because of the economic crisis or the energy price crisis, many players are trying to reduce their energy bill. And this is something which is really interesting because press picked up on this, and we have an opportunity that they relate to the energy bill in households, to the heat wave, to something which is much more tangible. And I think this was something which, if I compare it to other years, we've clearly seen that there was another entry point. So all in all, I would say like there has been many myths out there still in press. But all in all, a momentum to really bring energy to the forefront of societal discussion.
Thank you. Thanks. Gustavo, welcome. You have something to throw into the conversation. Is it a question, a reflection? Take it away.
Thank you, Matt. So first of all, just let me introduce myself, Gustavo Ponte from Energy Research Office of Brazil. And congratulations for the report. It's very interesting and very comprehensive with great insights to reflect. And one of the topics that we were discussing in the breakout session was regarding the subsidies, because during the presentation in the beginning of the meeting, it was mentioned that we still have a lot of subsidies for fossil fuels, and it represents something around 7% of the global GDP, if I'm correct. And it's a huge amount of money. But to be fair, it would be interesting to see also to have a comparison between the amount of subsidies for renewables as well, just to have an idea of how unbalanced we are when talking about subsidies for fossil fuels at the moment. But just a insight, just a suggestion for the next report. But thank you so much and congratulations.
May I jump in, Rana? I'm going to perhaps comment about that subsidies part, because we would love to have the whole picture of the subsidies for renewables, and this is super complicated to find. Today, the last report that it's more or less complete, it's from IRENA, and it looks out about in 2017. And since then, we haven't found anything that has been consolidated, giving us a fair picture of what is happening in the subsidy side for renewables. And we can call it subsidies, we can, incentives, but we don't have that picture. And this is something about the challenges we spoke at the very beginning. Data, it's not there. And it would be nice to have, of course, I would love to have this picture to understand how much are we moving forward, how governments are pushing that money forward. And this is very complicated. So yes, we would love to have, if you know somebody that does, no, I'm joking, but yeah, I mean, this will be great, but I don't know how we're gonna make it. Perhaps other organizations also might need to start collecting that data, for sure.
Now, may I compliment what Natalie said? I think this is the data part, but then there is a political part too. There is a political answer to this message too. The reality, Gustavo, is that it's similar. We're comparing costs, and it's always a question where we put boundaries, you see, and we see it, for instance, when we're assessing the sustainability or cost of renewable energy. Players who are pushing against renewable energy will directly say like, yes, but you need the infrastructure investment and you need this and you need this and you need this. And it's actually not cost. They will integrate all the environmental and social impacts into the cost basically of renewables, but they will clearly not speak about the external costs or on the fossil fuel side. And I think this is basically also something where we clearly see that, so I take the example of sustainability. It's not the same as sustainability at the subsidies, but we're for the moment conducting a project on renewable energy and sustainability because there is a real questions, obviously. Any technology, any infrastructure we have does have an impact, that's a reality. And how you assess it depends very much on how you define the methodology, the boundaries you put, etc. We have clearly, and since 3 years, we're having discussions because we need the societal support for the transition that is clear. We obviously do not want to have massive environmental impacts or social impact, that is also clear. So we were tempted every year to have like a short sidebar in the Global States report on this topic. And we have deliberately decided to rather have a broader project where it is about bringing the diversity of perspectives together, the voices, to also analyze like the common ground of understanding, to become less attackable, because as soon as you have like a snippet piece, and this would happen potentially also on a piece on subsidies for renewable energy. So Rent21 is saying like we have subsidies for renewable energy, even though it's clearly from our side, our point of view, rather support for renewable energy. There is players who would pick this up and use it. So it is really important to have this in a quite comprehensive way and balanced way. And I think this is probably the other level of data is not there, but then also what data is there and how it is balanced data so that we can also really encounter the narratives that are being developed on this data. Sorry, this was a very long answer, but.
It's lovely to listen in and learn. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, Hagar. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Rana, for sticking around for the full duration of the conversation. It's just been really valuable to learn more about the GSR and to hear some of your reflections. As I said before, this Zoom link will stay open for as long as you need it to stay open for. So if people want to sort of go into breakout rooms and have conversations after the session, then please do. Thank you for submitting your questions. There were a couple that snuck in around drivers for renewable energy transition and things like that we didn't have time to get to. So please do have those conversations. So I'm going to pose a question and you're going to respond to it. And then I'm going to hand over to Rana, and then that's the official program done. The question is this: based on everything you know when it comes to renewables, based on everything that you've heard today about the GSR and things like that, what do you think is in your power to do in relation to what you've heard and discussed today? So my colleague Catherine is putting that into the chat. What do you think is in your power? For example, what I discovered from the slides and the conversation, and then the part about the journalists is around that sort of is how you can sort of use that common language and think and so on with people around me. So there's a personal responsibility there. So what do you think is in your power to do in relation to what you've heard and discussed today? And please just add it in the chat. And whilst you are doing that, I'm going to diligently hand over to Rana to close us off. I was tempted to ask you the same question, but I think you're probably doing pretty much a good amount already. So instead, I'll just ask you to sort of close us off for the day.
Yes, but maybe I think like you see, like I'll still answer the question, I guess, like Matt, because I also feel like we can actually do quite a lot of things as energy consumers, obviously, but I really think like look at how you reduce your bill, look at where your energy comes from, knock at your local government's door and say like, okay, you really don't understand why the rooftops are not covered with solar PV and what they can do to make this happen. Talk to your neighbors, educate your kids. I don't know. I mean, I think there are many things we can do at the, and okay, this is now my critical 3.5 seconds. Go and vote, because the reality is the government we elect will make a difference. And we see it clearly when you have like, so let's take the example of Australia. See, it just took them a couple of weeks after being in place to increase their climate commitments. And we see subnational governments, for instance, in Australia, the ones who have invested in renewable energy, are actually the region that face much less in increase in electricity bills. So Queensland, which is highly subsidizing coal since ever, has an electricity bill which is approximately 30% higher than the other regions in Australia. So I think this is go and vote. And so what are the perspectives? The perspective is you'll hear back from us very soon. So, so first, thanks to all. Please reach out to us if you see opportunities to carry this message into other forums, not only in the energy bubble, but also outside. We are very, very happy to support this. We're happy to provide information. We're happy to join in for conversations. The other part is very clearly join us for other conversations too. We are currently, some of you might have seen it, we have the Global Rendezvous, but we also have the Regional Rendezvous focusing very much on Africa, because let's be honest, I think there are many battlegrounds for the moment to work on and carry the renewable energy story. So we have the next rendezvous happening next week on Africa. Join us there, because the reality is we speak about global developments, but they need to happen locally. And this is actually where the connectors are really interesting. So South-South, North-South, different types of players, different visions will clearly make our messages stronger. And I guess like the third part is we always speak about crowdsourced information. And I think I would just like to share this. This is really the power of the community. I would really like to thank the community here very much. Why? Not only because we have better data, but because we also have data that is shared by so many players, and where we can sit around the table and can basically all relate to what is in the Global States Report. So I think it's like developing a common language also about renewable energy and creating real ownership of this. So basically the ask here is, use the data in your own activities, make it evolve, give us a feedback what you would need us to do so that we can really build on this, and see it as a way also to make our community of change makers more powerful, because we tell different stories by relating to the same evidence. And I think this is something which is really powerful. And then I'd say like, thank you. Have a good afternoon, day, evening, wherever you are.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rana, and thank you everybody for attending. I could just mirror what Rana says about thanking people for their time. If you would like to stay, you can. We will be creating some breakout rooms. Catherine is doing that in the background now. So if you would like to stay and have conversations, if you've heard something, want to discuss something, you are more than welcome to do so. That's it from me. Catherine, can you please give some instruction on how they can move to breakout rooms and have conversations once I've said thanks again? So thanks again and goodbye.